Okay, welcome back everyone. Reconvene the meeting and we're going to item 4.2, recommendations of the District Plan Review Subcommittee meeting held on the 4th of December. There's been a lot of work happening in November and December to get us to this point. Just acknowledge that. We've still got another meeting of the subcommittee on the 18th, so next Monday, where I think we're dealing with the final chapters and getting those recommended through to council. The intention is that they'll be adopted, I believe, in the first meeting in February, thereabouts. And in the meantime, there are a bunch of things that will automatically become effective as soon as we publish the proposed plan. Some of the rules so that basically property owners don't preempt what's happening as it goes through the rather lengthy process of submissions and cross submissions. What we've got today is a list of some of the rules that aren't automatically effective, but staff are recommending that they should be effective when we publish that plan in February some stage. So first of all, I'll go to Mr. Campbell and just see whether you want to make any comment.
Thank you, Mayor Kircher. So yeah, effectively, as you mentioned, there's a default provision in the RMA under Section 86, capital B, and that kicks off for largely biophysical matters, but also heritage. So those provisions in the plan, if adopted for notification, would kick in. And there's a very small subset we're suggesting would also be added. One, to improve or reduce the consent burden, improve things for rural landowners around earthworks, and also the future urban growth areas, which kind of signal from the spatial plan that may come on stream in due course. But in the meantime, under the rural residential zoning, we wouldn't want to see them compromised for future residential development by subdivision that could do that. The other one there is around outstanding natural features and landscapes. And just a reminder that our current district plan has these mapped with rules at the moment. The lengthy process of going through landowner engagement and working through the new classification for landscapes and features under the RMA, regional policy statements, landscape guidelines, etc., has worked its way through. As a result of the draft plan consultation last year, a series of landowners were visited and also a peer review was done on the features mapping. So that has resulted in a reduction of the number and extent of natural features and the refinement of some where they have actually increased in size as well in some areas. So there's been a bit of give and take in those. And also in the outstanding natural landscapes, that's also aligned with particularly the Canterbury Regional Policy Statement up the valley, and some reworks done in those areas, and also to pick up existing kind of farm operational base areas where they're excluded from that classification because they're largely built up, have infrastructure for farms, that type of thing. So they've been worked through with landowners over the last few months. It has taken quite a while because of that peer review process, getting it remapped, redigitized in a format that's ready to present to you. Thank you.
Thank you. Right. Well, Councillor Thompson, you're chair of the District Plan Review Subcommittee. Do you have anything to add?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think one of and I'm comfortable with the process that the subcommittee has gone through. However, I do have some discomfort in terms of the fact that we took some time in getting this mapping out to landowners, and we need to assure our ratepayers that we're actually working for our ratepayers in the thorough vetting process. However, there is some legislation that we have to work within. But certainly in terms of perception, I'm uncomfortable that ratepayers only got these maps in the last few days, and it appears that we're making a decision contrary to what some opinions may be. However, we also need to clearly understand that the process going forward, the process starts again once we have a proposed district plan. Everyone has time to submit, and then we can actually move into a formal hearings process. So this is not a fait accompli today in terms of delivering the proposed district plan.
Thank you. Councillor Blackler.
Thank you. Mr. Campbell, I was just wondering, yeah, I mean, I was part of the subcommittee that made the recommendation that we vote in favour of this today, but I just wanted to re-clarify what the rationale was for bullet point 1 to be that, you know, those various rules throughout that that section being incorporated additional to what's required under the RMA.
Yeah, through you, Mr. Chair. As I mentioned, the current district plan has outstanding natural landscapes and features mapped. So those provisions would apply even when we notify the plan. What we're looking at is where those features or mapping has changed. There's going to be an area where the provisions wouldn't apply. So it'd be a bit of an odd scenario from a landscape perspective to say the rules apply to the older mapped areas, but not the new. So that's why we're saying recommending that these should be included. So the new mapping is consistent with the rules that are in the plan.
So just to clarify the quantum of what that looks like, we're talking about what sort of magnitude of difference. It's a significant amount. I just can't recall that step change from what it was to what it is now.
Yeah, and particularly in the natural landscape area, that's increased to align with the Canterbury and Otago regional policy statements. For some properties, the features may be smaller or they may be bigger. So it's very much case by case, but there is generally an overall increase because nationally and regionally the changes have come through that we are implementing. So the landscape one as a whole would increase. Some of the feature stuff's a refinement, or it might be a new feature in some cases. But you know, the overall magnitude, I haven't got a percentage figure because we've only just redone the maps.
It would be fair to say that it's a significant increase, as in maybe say, I think from memory it was something like 2,000 hectares to 30,000, wasn't it, or something like that?
Yeah, I haven't got the number off the top of my head, but a lot of the increases on Crown land as well. There's been a lot of Crown pastoral review go through, so that's increased as a result of that as well, particularly on the outstanding landscapes. So a lot of the land mapped will be DOC or Crown land.
So I just want to make the comment, you know, but the reason we adjourned the meeting and have the discussion is because there's been a lot of feedback received, particularly by more rural councillors, just around the fact that a lot of people have just got their maps and don't reflect what they think they should reflect, which may or may not be an issue overall. But I think it's the concern that you know, we basically send out the maps and then within a couple of days we being asked to resolve this particular decision. And I think, yeah, it's the concern that we have is whether this, you know, we want to make sure we work in good faith with our property owners around the district, and it has the look of not acting in good faith. That's not intentional. I think it's just the way the timing has gone, but yeah, that's part of the concern that we have. Mr. Cook, would you like to comment on that?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. If it had been intentional, we would have been here today and we'd have sent the maps out tomorrow. The maps went out as soon as they were completed and ready and at a standard that we could get them mailed out. The two events are anyway.
Thank you. Councillor Hopkins and then Councillor McCone.
Yeah, I'll reserve comment for the moment. I have a question. first of all, I guess we have to assume that a lot of people haven't necessarily been following the deliberations of the subcommittee, although they have been streamed, and I know some people have been watching either live or subsequently. But this report might have been assisted, I think, by some brief description of what the implication of the various rules are. And it might be that Mr. Campbell can give us a very quick, or give the public a very quick précis of those, especially in bullet point number 1 now. The other question is, I think you said, did you say earlier that there are certain things specified in the Act that become lawful or legal immediately when a plan is notified? What are they, please?
Yeah, through Mr. Chair. So the default immediate legal effect provisions in the Act relate to, and I'll read them out, relates to water, air, or soil, and it's particular to soil conservation, protects areas of significant Indigenous vegetation, protects areas of significant habitats of Indigenous fauna, protects historic heritage, and lastly provides for or relates to aquaculture activities. So they are the default provisions. In terms of what those exact rules are, I mean, that's quite a list of 15 or so rules, so I can refer to the chapter in the previous agenda that they were included in for the District Plan Review Subcommittee, but they effectively pick up most of the rules that provide for permitted activities, what might require consent, and any particular standards for those natural features and landscapes. So it's quite all-encompassing. But as I said, it's mainly to make sure that the difference between the current mapped areas in the operative plan and the newly mapped areas in the proposed plan would have some sort of framework, notwithstanding that the current areas would already be subject to rules anyway and are now.
Thank you, Councillor McCone.
Yeah, look, don't know where to start really. My personal opinion, I'm totally against any of this right at the present point in time. That we're elected by the ratepayers for the betterment of the district by the ratepayers. These people have just had this information delivered yesterday or the day before. They at least should have the decency of having the time to go and investigate further with their own accountants, lawyers, everything else on the implications of what it puts to them. And I think just rushing this through is not a good space to be. We've got to give them time to sit down and do it, whether the bureaucracy side of it is there and it must be adhered to by law, but also we've got to be fair to the people that pay the rates.
Any other questions, maybe with a question mark at the end of the statement? Councillor Blacklock.
Thank you. Mr. Campbell, I was just wondering if you could confirm, but like, because I understand the logic of what you're saying around consistency of the layers, but today's not the time for the conversation, or these aren't dictating where the boundaries of the mapping sits. It's what will apply within those layers when they're decided, and the district plan committee is to the subcommittee is to work on that in the next session. Is that correct?
Yeah, through Mr. Chair, that's correct, Councillor Blacklock. That all this is seeking to say is that the rules that apply would have immediate legal effect. The mapping has gone through that iterative process over the last few years and would be coming to the District Plan Review Subcommittee at its next meeting. So there'd be a chance to say, here's the advice back on all of the mapping across the district, whether it's zones or features or heritage, etc. That's presented in a complete package in terms of all of the maps and been informed through this type of process. So what's been sent out to the landowners, you're correct, is not the rules as such. It's the remapping request and peer review process that we agreed to undertake. And all we're saying is in this recommendation from the previous District Plan Review Subcommittee that we'd consider those rules would apply. Even if you don't adopt that recommendation, the maps would still be subject to a process to go through approval and be considered anyway.
Thank you for that explanation. One of the rules within that first bullet point that I guess I have a question about specifically is NFL R9 around flood works being permitted if it's been undertaken by the council or district or regional authorities. But in the context of many of the farming properties down the margin of the Waitaki River, that they're often undertaking those works themselves. So would they be impacted in a meaningful way as an interim, between these becoming effective now and the opportunity to submit?
Yes, if you're talking about like the Waitaki River that has that overlay on it in the proposed maps, then yes, if it's a private landowner, they wouldn't fall under that permitted rule. I'd be very surprised if the regional council wasn't involved in flood protection works along the Waitaki River margins. I think if it was that type of issue, the landowner would be normally engaged with the regional council and they would consider what type of works were needed. The landowner may be doing it as the agent for the regional council, potentially.
Yeah, thank you for that clarification.
Any other questions? Okay.
Yes, I do have another question, Mayor Fisher. Mr. Campbell, were we to take the position that the council as a whole would like to hear back from the District Plan Review Committee, and at least get a steer from that committee as to its view on the mapping, would it be possible to actually make this recommendation or delay this vote either till the 19th or indeed early in the new year if need be?
Through Mr. Chair, I guess the implications are that we're relying on the Environment Court timing and process to consider a request. So if we delay a request to the Environment Court, then that may impact on when we can notify the proposed plan. So we'd have to maybe be on standby for when council was considering approving the proposed plan, so that they knew what the Environment Court outcome was on any of these requests. So yeah, it could go another week, but then it would just be limited to one or two matters, then it might not hold things up too much.
Okay, looking for someone to move something.
With your permission, I will move that council approves, etc., through to the words district plan is notified, and after that I will move that we delete bullet point 1 in totality and only vote on bullet points 2 and 3. So my amended resolution is that we notify rule EWR1 and standard EWS1, etc., and rule sub R17 as it applies.
Okay, so moving the recommendation as it stands, but without the first bullet point. Do we have a?
Can I ask a question, please?
I need to ask for a seconder first, even if it's pro forma. Deputy Mayor Haley. You go ahead, Councillor Blackler.
Thank you. Mr. Campbell, if we go ahead with that, the amended motion, what do you see as the negative implications for that?
Yeah, through the chair, as mentioned, depending on how the next few meetings go with the District Plan Review Subcommittee and Council, the current operative district plan will have mapped areas and rules, and if council chooses not to add to that these ones proposed here, then there'll be a potential gap in the new mapped areas versus the old mapped areas, which would be it's a risk to council that things might happen, and not be consented or not need consent, but that's the risk in terms of in those areas where there's a gap or a difference from the current plan to the proposed.
Okay. You want to speak to the motion?
Yes, please, Mayor Coucher, if you'll allow. My reason for doing this is dispassionate. I'm not taking a position on the merits of the rules. And I think it's important that the council, especially those who might be involved in hearings, remain open-minded and don't take positions in advance of deliberations. But I think in this instance, what we have here is an unfortunate and unintended coincidence of delivery and decision. By which I mean the people have only just got the maps. Now, that's an issue for us. We didn't get them out earlier. No criticisms intended. As Mr. Cook has said, it was necessary to get them to a level and degree of accuracy and the like that met standards and so forth. Ergo, they weren't ready until they were ready, and they've just gone out. Now, the impact of adopting the rules, many of which are actually permissive rather than negative, immediately after the delivery of maps, which, as I understand it, in some instances indicate quite substantially larger areas of land identified as an outstanding natural feature or landscape, I think is just too hasty and inclined to actually exacerbate existing suspicions and anxieties and doubts about the process. I totally endorse Councillor Thompson's point that nothing is decided today and that the true and ultimately democratic stage of the process, i.e. through notification, submission and cross submission, is yet to come, and people can have their day in court and can make their arguments then. But in the meantime, I'm willing to accept the risk, which I think is slight, of not having these rules applying to the extended ONF and ONL areas for the period between February and subsequently, especially given that Mr. Campbell has told us that a range of other areas automatically come into effect from February, including all the ones he listed, and I think additionally Waitaki. So I think in many instances the actual the areas are contiguous and similar. So to some extent, today leaving it out is a symbolic act, but it's also respectful of the fact that people haven't had time to digest the material they've received, contemplate its implications, and assess how they respond. Equally, councillors who are not on the subcommittee, I think, deserved a fuller explanation of why these rules should have been made effective from February onwards. I mean, there's nothing in here other than just a recommendation, and I think there should have been an explanatory paragraph for the public at large and for other councillors who haven't been following the subcommittee's activities.
Mr. Campbell.
Thank you, Mayor Coucher. Yeah, just to reiterate, as Councillor Hopkins pointed out, a fair chunk of the rules mentioned, particularly R1 through to R9, are permitted activity rules for those areas. With them now in front of me, so going on from that, R12, which is listed there, is around mining and quarrying, which excludes existing farm quarries in those areas. And also Rule 14 talks about plantation forestry, so that picks up that activity in those areas. I know there's been some concern in the community about that happening. And also 15 is around wilding species planted in those areas. And Rule 16 that's mentioned in the recommendation is around intensive indoor and outdoor primary production on those features and only on the outstanding natural features and landscapes. So it's limited in what the resolution is seeking, but it's one of the key areas we did try to pick up was that concern around the forestry and wildings that it's been expressed before in the community. So yeah, another option might be to refine the set of rules that you'd recommend have immediate legal effect if there's concerns on any one in particular, but the first 1 to 9 are permitted. And those other ones listed, as I mentioned, are mining and quarrying, excluding farm quarries and the forestry and intensive farming activities, only on those areas.
Thank you. Councillor McCone.
I'd just like to carry on from what Jim was talking about, and regardless of what's going on, we have to bear in mind, again, I keep going on about it, that we've got to support our ratepayers. And some of these decisions here will actually have financial impact on their value and their businesses. So that's got to be adhered to. And I think we owe them the decency to give them time to look through of what's been done. In a lot of cases, the land plans have actually increased in size rather than diminished. And it's easier to do it now rather than through a legal process, which is going to add more cost to those that have to defend their own land.
Any other speakers? Councillor Blackler.
Well, as some sort of compromise to the, I was wondering if I could move an amendment to the amendment where we.
No, it's a resolution.
Amendment to the motion.
To the motion, sorry, technicalities.
You're doing well.
From maybe we include Rule 12 through listed through to, so it's 12, 14, 15, 16, I think, Mr. Campbell, and leave 1 and 3 through to 9 out. Would that be an option?
I mean, the rules 1 to 9 are permitted activity rules, so it clarifies what is permitted, which is to the benefit of landowners. The other rules signal when consent is required, and it's limited to those matters I read out. So you could pick and mix whatever rules you wanted, but yeah, it's really what you want to try and address through the giving immediate legal effect in those areas that would be new and come on stream with proposed plan mapping.
It's really difficult not having the rules in front of us to know what we've got.
To clarify, it's from where it becomes a controlled activity.
Yeah, no, just to actually have the wording in front of us. It's just the problem with only having the recommendation come through as it has. Councillor Thompson, oh, sorry, Mr. Palmer.
Well, I was going to suggest, given that there's concern around the lack of detail and some thought around the implications of this, that perhaps you leave this on the table for now, and that at the next meeting we bring back some further clarification. I'm concerned that the item here is about agreeing what rules will apply at the end of a process that is due to end in February when the council decides on those rules. It's not on where the lines on the maps are. So my suggestion would be that we leave it on the table, bring it back on the next week with further clarification and implications as to what those would be. I think Mr. Campbell indicated that 1 week might not harm too much, but if we had further delay beyond that, then the ability to adopt the plan with these rules applying would be limited, or we'd have to delay. So my suggestion is leave it on the table for now.
I think we've got the motion in front of us, which is for part of it, and I think we could proceed with that, but have the other part come back to us next week as a new report, which hopefully will include listing what the rules actually are.
In which case, I think we need to actually have a second resolution. I mean, we can vote on the first one, but in my view, we probably would need a second resolution, which I'd be happy to move. That
we've got a motion already in front of us.
Well, no, but I'm just if we're gonna get a report.
Suggesting an amendment to your own motion.
No, I'm not. I'm suggesting if Gary wants us to vote on the other two now, I'm happy to do that. I personally would prefer to let the whole lot lie on the table with the motion and moved and seconded as part of that package, because we could then amend that on the day if we wanted to, subject to the additional information. However, if you're going to do it this way, then in my view, we need formally to request that the Chief Executive present an additional report for the December 19 council meeting, outlining, explaining and clarifying the reasons for seeking Environment Court approval to immediately adopt rules NFL R1 through to the words landscape chapter at the end of bullet point 1.
I'll take that as notice of motion. Councillor Thompson, sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Look, I think that the Chief Executive's suggestion is totally appropriate. The District Plan Subcommittee meet again on the 18th. And whilst we have a 700+ page agenda, I'm sure that we can squeeze a discussion around this. Mr. Cook shaking his head, but there are issues that need to be dealt with, and in good faith, I would totally support Mr. Palmerley's suggestion.
Are you moving the item line on the table?
Well, can't you've got a motion?
No, we've got a motion.
You can invite me to withdraw it.
No.
Okay.
We're, at any point, someone can move that we allow the matter to lie on the table. I'm hearing that from Councillor Thompson. So if you're moving that, we are seeing that by Councillor Blackler. I will put that without debate because that's the rule. So those in favour of that, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against? Okay, so we'll lie on the table until next meeting on the 19th of December. Okay. That was a lot of talk about nothing. No, as far as not actually getting to where it was intended to get to, but I think it is for the best that we do take a breath, that we have the more information in front of us next week. And we've got the opportunity to, make a more considered decision accordingly. So, thank you very much for that. I'm going to ask now that we move on to item 5.2, which is the unsanitary building one, because I'm hopeful that is going to take very little time at all. So if we go to page 90 and welcome Josh Dooley to the chamber. And when you're ready to go, I'm just happy for you to address the report.
Good morning. In front of you, you should see the review for the dangerous, affected and unsanitary building policy. We're required by law to review this every 5 years. So this is a review of the existing document that we already have. It is not dissimilar to the majority of other councils who hold documents like this for policy. The main change we've had is adding a section in law which was not in existence in 2018, and it is now been added into this document. It essentially allows for section 123B for special provisions for the management of buildings in the event of an emergency.
Okay. Thank you.
Questions?
First of all, any questions? Councillor Holding?
Sorry, Josh, could you just explain a little bit further what the new track change is, what it means, unpack that a little bit?
Sorry, can you say that again?
The new legal things that you've added in that weren't specifically there, can you explain a little bit further?
Yeah, sure. So the previous document had the definitions essentially listed on the paper itself. We have taken the time to update the current document and insert hyperlinks so that it actually goes to the location, whether it be under the Building Act, to give the current definition in law.
Okay. Councillor Hopkins and Councillor Blackler.
Yeah, look, a very quick comment and a question. under my question at the very start of the new policy, introduction 1.1, we do say that the Act requires territorial authorities to have a policy. I think, and I wonder if you agree with me, and hence my question, I would like to see us tell people that we are obliged to review this policy every 5 years, and that's why this document's been produced. And I just think from the point of view of public information, that would be helpful. And the other thing is on page 97. Oh yes, there's another. If you look under 3.5, taking action, 3.5.1, in accordance with section 124 and 125 of the Act, the council will, so that's will, and yet under C it says may. Now it can't be will and may. So I would have thought we will need to delete the word may, so that C simply reads request a written report.
I think you're better to start one A and B with will, take the will off the first line. And so A becomes will advise, B becomes will as a consequence of the building being identified, and C remains may, because what it's saying is there's some discretion there as to whether that happens, unless you're saying that needs to be done. But at the moment, that would be an impost that's not being asked for. But if you're in favour of greater bureaucracy, I guess it's up to you, Councillor Hopkins. I'll just clarify what you're asking for.
No, your suggestion makes perfect sense. I mean, I was simply making the point that you can't have will and may because one contradicts the other.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Blackler.
Thank you. Thanks, Josh. I just wondered if under definitions you could clarify if when we talk about building, it includes the surrounding property, or is it just the building itself? And if not, do we think it would make sense to add some additional wording that would capture the whole site?
The definition of the building will solely be the physical building itself. The definition will be in the Building Act. It will exclude other items around the house unless those items could directly affect the building in some way, shape, or form. So they would be separate, but then if they were contributing to a building being dangerous or unsanitary, then it could be considered.
Thank you for that.
Just a couple of things from there. There's a couple of minor grammatical things I'll just send through to you separately, Josh. The other is 3.1 or 3.10, sorry. Rather than saying we're dealing with building owners, can we just change that to engaging with building owners? It's a little more positive, I think. So it'd be handy if we just modify that. Deputy Mayor Haley.
Thank you, through the chair. I just have a question just around, I guess, the overall principles and the approach, you know, like of the policy that's set out. And then also under 3.3, it says council will take a passive approach. I'm not quite sure what that actually means. I just don't want the document to be quite contradictory. And then it would be helpful, I think, just with the formatting, there's a policy and then you have your procedures, which are separate, but they're mixed up in between. So I guess I'm just suggesting just for future policy development or review, just to separate them so it's really crystal clear to people that our team that are applying it, but also to those that this would impact on. And just the language used, Mayor Gary Kutcher has suggested like a more collaborative type approach, which is quite different to parts of the intent of the policy. So it's just my feedback from there.
So just on that, with the policy approach, so rather it's more policy and implementation. If you've got the policy principles and then the overall approach, that's really the implementing, isn't it? Yeah. So is that clear for you, Josh? Just maybe a bit of an amendment as to how that's set. Okay. Is someone happy to move the recommendation with those amendments. Councillor Thompson, Councillor Hopkins, thank you. Those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against, that's carried. Thank you very much, Josh. Appreciate that. We'll go now back to 5.1, which is much earlier. Let's find the page for that. So the approval for the draft waste minimisation and management plan for public consultation on page 26. And welcome Steve and Lucy Ann to the chamber. In their uniforms. Very good. Okay. Right. If you'd like to speak to this, either one of you, who wants to start? Lucy Ann.
Tēnā koutou katoa. Thanks for having us today. We're really excited to bring you the draft waste minimisation and management plan for 2024 to 2030, along with the statement of proposal for approval to proceed to public consultation next year. These form part of your agenda papers and we'll take those documents as read, please. This draft plan has been created in changing times and as such looks different to our last plan. It's been created following the Otago Region Waste Assessment, which was brought to the governance team on August the 22nd. The Otago Region Waste Assessment reviewed our current waste management and minimisation plan, 2018 to 2024. It looked at our regional key issues and also looked at what the future demand for waste solutions will be. It also recommended that our current plan be revoked and a new one created. So this draft new plan has been created with a range of input from stakeholders. A proposed new vision for our community along with goals and objectives were shared with the governance team on October 6th. And the recommended options from the Otago Region Waste Assessment were shared with the governance team on October 24th. Key stakeholder engagement was also conducted to ensure that the proposed actions are the right fit for our community and as well will meet our obligations to protect public health and achieve effective waste minimisation and management, and are also feasible over the term of this plan, which is 6 years. Those core aspects of a new strategic direction and the preferred regional options, which we brought to the governance team in August and October, were fundamental to creating a waste minimisation and management plan that will serve us well in this new future of waste. The action table in this draft plan was then distilled from those preferred options we presented. Targets have also been designed, and these are to ensure that the proposed actions will lead to the realisation of the vision, goals and objectives of this new plan. We propose publicly consulting on our draft WMMP 2024 to 30 in February of 2024. As the world of waste is a really fast evolving one, and this draft plan is quite a different style to our last document, as well as the fact that the considerations included in it could be significant to our community, we believe there's merit in a standalone consultation. So today we bring you the recommendations. The first one is to change the title of the plan to place minimisation first, to signal our commitment to supporting minimising waste before we have to manage it, and to approve this draft plan to proceed to public consultation in February of next year, and also to approve our statement of proposal document.
Thank you. Sounds simple. Anything you want to add, Steve? Okay. Right, into the detail. So, well, first of all, councillors, do you have any questions? Councillor Hopkins?
Yeah, I need to be, I want us and the community to be absolutely clear. If I look at page 37, well, even page 50 of this document, there's a reference to, under data and monitoring, we say proposed diversion performance standards for urban household curbside services will need to be met. Waitaki has no council-controlled curbside services. Services and benefits currently provided to the community by WRT may be impacted. We don't say how at any point in this document. Also on page 37, we say, I'll just find it, bear with me for a moment. mandated council-controlled urban household recycling and food scraps collections are proposed to be required. Now, my question is very simple. Are they required or not? And because nothing in this document explicitly says to me, we're going to have to do it, and here's what it's going to cost. So question one.
Is that page 37 of the document or?
Well, page
of the
30,
agenda?
well, sorry, page 37 of the agenda.
Oh, right.
It's,
Okay.
because
Yeah, no, I think Lucian's trying to answer it. So,
Through me, Chair, I'll answer that question. At this stage, they are proposed changes. What we do know is that the raft of proposals to meet the vision of the new waste strategy, Te Rautaki Para, were intended to be passed into law before the general election. Some of them were, some of them weren't. So the council controlled mandated services to urban populations over 1,000 people are still proposals at this stage, and the expectation is that they will come into law in 2025.
clarification, then, so because at one point on this you use resource management planning, you say we have to have regard to this, whereas if it is an obligation, then we must give effect to it and make it happen. So I want to be absolutely clear. Are you saying that at the moment Parliament hasn't mandated a compulsory council curbside collection?
Through me, Chair, yes, that's correct.
thank you. Any other questions? I've got a number of aspects just that I wanted to give some feedback on at the moment. In the 1.1.3, there's a placeholder for a circular economy in the Te Ao Māori worldview. That potentially is a major aspect of what could be there. So I think, you know, it's something that we would like to see, to at least give some informal feedback when you've got that and are able to populate that part of it. There's some other bits and pieces which I'm quite happy to engage with you separately on, but there is a concerning a lack of information on the mention of council's provision of services, the waste and recycling transfer stations, the services that we have in places like Enfield, I think Lake Ohau Village, and a couple of other ones I think were mentioned in there. So some of that, yeah, most of it's just small tweaks, which I can definitely address with you separately. Just double checking if there's anything else. On the things like under infrastructure on page 50 of our agenda, it's got infrastructure. Palmerston landfill closure plan needs to be developed, and then it's straight after that, Waitaki has no landfills. So, you know, just getting some tidying up that I can address with you. Sorry, I'm just trying to find out where else I might have any bits. I'll see if there's anyone else wants to ask anything or say anything at the moment. Councillor Blackler.
Thank you. On page 47 of the agenda, or 15 of the report, table 3, I found that table interesting, and I just wanted to confirm, does that tell us that curbside dumpers have considerably less commitment to diversion? And yeah, I also found it interesting that the findings were that 70% of curbside collection is divertible, but earlier in the report there is an indication that our collection of data is lacking, and so I wanted to understand what the degree of certainty is around that 70% figure, and then I just had an overarching question as to how do we how do we address the fact that some people in our community that are already doing the right thing with their waste would possibly be negatively impacted by a shift to such a setup in terms of the overall cost to them as an individual?
So the table, the diversion potential table, so that was based off a SWAP audit, so a solid waste analysis protocol that was done at our transfer station in April of 2022. So as a snapshot in time, that is accurate. What they saw of that. There are a lot of assumptions built into these when they extrapolate that over a period of time. And as mentioned in this report, one of our key issues is that we do not have a range of data. So when we look at the data that we do have, and especially over the Otago region, some assumptions must be made because we can't fill in the gaps. But what the consultant that we worked with does is look at data across the country. So find similar councils and sort of peer review the data that they're seeing here with other case studies across the country to get the most robust assumptions that they can.
Supplementary to that, do you think that's or when you say finding similar councils, is that match? Because I see somewhere in the report it says we produce, what was it, 396 tonnes of waste per head of population in this district, but the average for the nation was 700 kilos. Is that correct? So earlier in the report it says something about 700 in the introduction, I think it is. So I'm just trying to understand if we are already doing well as a district or through our existing process, or can we do better? Because at one stage in the report it says that we're very poor performing when you can benchmark against the OECD, but then later in the report it says that it kind of infers that we're doing well. So I just want to clarify that point.
Yeah, so I guess if we look at sort of a global perspective, we know that New Zealand doesn't perform well in waste matters globally. We are a bit behind the times with our recycling and technology and diversion performance. But in terms of how Waitaki performs compared to the rest of the country, I think it would be fair to say we're not too bad, but what the new waste strategy for the country is trying to achieve is to bring us more in line with neighbouring countries, and to make sure that we are performing where we should on the global stage. And what we do know when we drill down into the data we have around what we are sending to landfill as a district, there are significant improvements that can easily be made. We can see that a large proportion of organic waste is sent to landfill by our community, and one fundamental aspect of the proposals under the new strategy is to get that out of landfill. So the compulsory food scraps proposal is aimed at that. And we can also see that construction and demolition waste is another area that could easily be targeted. And in terms of this district, we're quite high up there, but nationally that's an issue as well. So the diversion targets that are proposed to back up the mandated household recycling proposals are diverting 30% by 2026, 40% by 2028, and 50% by 2030. So while we are as a district diverting a reasonable amount at the moment and performing reasonably, we can see that there's a lot of improvement to be made, and if these diversion targets come through into law, then we've got a job ahead of us to make sure that we meet those by the targeted timeframes.
Thank you. Other main comments really are in the action plan. There's a number of areas where it says we'll decide on this once we've decided on something else, and I can't see how we can't actually work on the things at the same time. We can't decide that we're going to have food scraps pick up and then decide how we're going to deal with it. We need to actually understand that we have got some way of dealing with the food scraps, but as part of saying we're going to have it. So there are some services like recycling is another similar one. So they do need to go hand in hand, and I would rather see them framed in that regard rather than separated out, because they're not. I don't think they're sequential decisions. They are decisions need to be made in parallel. My feedback. Councillor Hopkins.
Yeah, Mayor Casey, you make some very valid points.
Always.
And what you're, seriously, I don't think this document is fit for purpose yet, in part because there are too many questions in it that aren't answered. I have a couple of questions for, and I think 45 pages is woefully long, tragically long. We're just we might as well actually infect people with consultation fatigue. But I do have a question for the Chief Executive, or two questions actually. One, has this document been peer reviewed by the comms team, and have they commented on it? And if not, why not? Because I would have thought that might have been a good thing to do in the course of transforming our communications and council generally. And secondly, are you satisfied? Do you think it's a good idea to have this consultation in advance of the LTP? I mean, I notice that we're being asked to approve this from January 29 onwards. And personally, I think it's premature, and I would like to see us do it parallel with and in conjunction with the long-term plan. So why are we doing it early? Those are my questions to the Chief Executive.
I'm not sure of the answer to the first one, but in terms of the second one, I think there's lots of things that are part of the business of the organisation that we need to get on with. There's a danger, I think, if we put this and other things into the consultation on the LTP that, we either don't get the response on what is a really big and important topic, and it, can get lost in a lot of the other issues that we need to, consider. I think undoubtedly waste will, and what happens with waste needs to be part of one of the options we consider in the LTP. But in terms of the detail of that, I think including that in the LTP process, I don't think would do justice to what is a big plan with lots of complications and considerations within it that we need to have a separate discussion on with our community. I think the only option, if you didn't want to do this in January, would be to defer it after the LTP. But I think that poses risks as well in terms of being able to, take forward a new plan. We're trying to work with our community groups and with our colleagues in Otago, most of whom are ahead of us on this. And I think, if we're going to work with them and get the best and most economical solutions for our community that are affordable, I think keeping to the timetable set out is probably the best approach.
Well, sorry, a supplementary question. You've just said if we don't do it, you don't want to do it at the same time. So if you don't want to do it earlier, do it after. Now, given the state of uncertainty that exists, and given the fact that we've been told this morning that a whole bunch of things that we thought pre-election were going to be forced upon us may not be, given that we are in a very ambiguous and uncertain world, maybe it would be better to wait a little bit until we get some clarification from Wellington, some certainty from Parliament, and then consult on a document that actually is grounded in absolutes and verifiable facts, which would justify and provide very good reason for doing it after the LTP, not beforehand, surely, Mr. Barnley.
So I'd say that, we will continue to live in an uncertain world. The uncertainty continues to grow. I think as a council, we need to make decisions and deal with the issues as, we see them. And it is an issue. The performance of Waitaki and New Zealand more generally compared to the developed world in terms of minimising waste and diverting from landfill isn't good. It needs dealing with. We need to have the discussion on that. If we keep saying, we are living in an uncertain world, we won't make any decisions on anything. We need to live with uncertainty and make decisions in what will continue to be an uncertain world.
Question again, sorry. Are you happy that we put out if we adopt the document today, we are putting out a document that identifies on page 69, $1 million of existing costs, and on pages 67, 66 through to 67, and pages 70, 71 and 72, actually has a whole series of rateable costs that simply say TBD, to be determined. How on earth can people submit intelligently on a document that doesn't actually give them clear and accurate and meaningful numbers?
So this is about setting a general direction. It's not about making the decision on what we do with those things. I think we need to have that discussion, that consultation with our community on what is a draft document that then enables us to go on and do further work, including if there was as part of that direction a notion that we wanted to explore further curbside collection of various materials. As a council, then we go into getting some more detailed costings on that.
Just go back to one of Councillor Hopkins' questions at the start, which was whether the document had actually gone past the comms team as far as proofing it, not proofing it, actually editing it, or is it just that they've designed the layout?
So they've done a bit of both. They've designed the layout, but we have worked with them throughout this process. They weren't specifically on the project team that put this together. However, we held regular updates with them to let them know the progress on the plan, on the draft plan. And they have seen this plan and had time to digest it and give their feedback to us as part of the internal stakeholder engagement process.
There are some things on the feedback form which I will raise at the moment because I think they're of enough importance that councillors need to consider them as well. Part of on the feedback form, what are your thoughts on our focus areas, and then under leadership and collaboration, do you have any suggestions for how council could support reuse? Essentially, that's a bit where I believe it's we should be asking what's the feedback on what we have proposed, and then any other comments on leadership and collaboration. That's where it's other suggestions, so that we're being a bit clearer about what we're asking for. Under the engagement in education, workshops and waste minimisation diversion, the best way to engage with and educate our community. I'm not sure whether it's necessary best, but it's looking at is that a good way really to engage, because it depends on the individual as to what's the best way. So there's just some of those bits. I would like to see a little bit more about the costs in there when we're asking some fairly heavy questions about should we be involved in this or that. There is a cost implication, and whether that's followed up by the LTP defining some of those costs a bit more, or whether we simply don't know. Because it's quite reasonable to expect that if we're not providing a service and we haven't costed it out, we won't know what the cost will be. So anyway, just leave you with some of those thoughts. Councillor Blackland.
Thank you. On the basis that 70% of material is divertible, I think it's pretty shocking. Like, it's pretty appalling, our performance. But in saying that, so I guess my natural tendency is to lean that towards when we have a responsibility to do something. But in saying that, I support Councillor Hopkins' commentary around, some of the stuff should be costed out in this document. But also I think it needs to be set against, because we know that the waste levy is going to increase over time. So people's current poor performance, which is to them a cost-effective solution, may not be in the future. And if we were able to illustrate that graphically, I think that might help people to understand that the cost of just dumping everything is going to increase dramatically if the waste levy projections are that they're going to lift significantly. Is that correct?
Through the Mayor, there's one further forecast cost increase to $60 a tonne for the waste levy in July next year. that's all that's through at the moment. However, that may be something that is discussed whether there are further ones, but at the moment there's only one further forecast cost increase.
From what point?
So it's 50 at the moment, so
Okay.
it's going to increase to 60.
Okay. So yeah, I guess as that incrementally lifts over time, that should incentivize a shift in behaviour anyway to do the right thing, I guess is what I'm trying to say. And if we could illustrate that graphically against what we're doing now to what we could be doing and the net cost overall, it might, it would be good to illustrate that.
Okay, as councillors will note, we have gone slightly past morning tea time. We are boxing it on because we need to get this stuff done. And Mr. Neil, as the independent chair for the bar committee, is obviously being very patient. As we're 15 minutes already past when he was supposed to be starting his meeting. So apologies for that, but yeah, it makes it very difficult if we end up having to split this particular meeting. So we are carrying on. So anyway, we've got to where we're at. Is anyone willing to move any recommendation, any motion at this stage?
Mr. Chair, Your Bishop, Mr. Mayor, I will move that council approves a name change to the draft plan from the Waste Management and Minimisation Plan to the Waste Minimisation and Management Plan, and I would further move that the draft Waste Minimisation and Management Plan 2024-2030 be further reviewed prior to public release and consultation.
Okay, so just looking through what the other aspects of that so you're not moving those.
Well, if we're going to, well, we haven't agreed on amendments. We haven't agreed 3 and 4 on amendments. I think a range of people have raised issues and questions that suggest to me that a little bit more panel beating on the document generally is needed. And if that's the case, then in fact, that panel beating would mean that possibly, not necessarily, but possibly the consultation period would be different as well. Hence the resolution that I have moved as I have moved it.
Okay, do we have a seconder for that? That fails for lack of seconder. Councillor Linwood.
Question.
Yep.
May I ask it? So in the current consultation document, you've got in here for what services people would prefer should they come into effect. Would it not be better off to leave that in case they do come into effect? And we already have all of that feedback that we can take into consideration. Like we're just asking people if. So does that not make sense to leave it in there? What's your thoughts on that?
Lucianne?
Yes, so it's our recommendation that we do ask on that. If we introduce a service that is over and above the mandated or the proposed mandated services, such as including rubbish, then we would need to publicly consult on that. So by including those questions through this process, it allows us to gather that feedback from the community. Completely forgotten what I was going to say on that one. If we include those considerations in there now, it can inform the other body of work we're doing around feasibility of curbside services to understand what would work for our community. So that body of work is underway, and at the moment, we're operating under a plan that's not really fit for purpose. So operating under a new plan that gives us a strategic direction to take us into this new future of waste would be sensible. And it is a very fast evolving space, and it's not like any waste space that we've encountered before. So there are going to be some of those unknowns, but the strategic direction is the important thing. The curbside and what may come in terms of mandates is just a small part of that. This plan is about setting a strategic direction that focuses on leadership and collaboration. So stepping up to the mark and working more with our community and our partners and being more efficient. And that's the kind of key focus, and placing ourselves well to be able to make the decisions that we need to make in the future. And you know, if we have that plan through now, it allows us to work in that way, and we can then deal with what mandates come through, and we can have that feedback to inform that work and determine the way that we carry out that work. That makes sense.
To help move this along, I'm going to move. So the recommendations as stands, number 1. And number 2. Number 3, approves for release for public consultation as in 2 above the attached draft waste minimisation and management plan 2024 to 2030 with amendments to be agreed informally after this meeting. And number 4, approves the attached draft consultation document for the draft waste minimisation management plan 2024 to 2030 with amendments agreed informally after this meeting. Do we have a second, Councillor Linwood? Thank you. The idea of that is that there needs to be some amendments and so forth. We can't agree them all here because I think there's too many. I think it's an opportunity to put this into maybe a convenient review room and utilise the notes. So because you can see, I've got a number of notes, and if you can see what I'm making, then we can make decisions on what does end up in there. And also feedback can be given by the Steve and Lucianne on this as well. But it allows it to progress, and if it makes that time frame for consultation, then it hopefully it does. So we'll see how it goes. I deliberately changed number 4 for statement of proposal to a consultation document because it is something that we're consulting on and asking questions in. So it's not. I'm being you're just really proposing that there's a slight change of name to actually better reflect what I think it should be. Any other speakers to that, Councillor Hopkins?
Yeah, Mayor Kitcher, I'm sorry that my resolution failed to get a seconder. I didn't really expect that it would. I think your amendments have improved the situation, but I'm still going to vote against this. For briefly, I don't think we should be consulting so early. I think we're likely to jeopardise and contaminate engagement in the long-term plan, which is much more important. I think these documents are extraordinarily wordy. The 45-page waste minimisation and management plan talks about it being our plan for 2024 through to 2030. Because it actually takes 19 pages to get to what we are going to do from here on. And to me, it's a sad example or an unhappy example of local and central government communication, which is written for people who are used to writing or reading university essays, but not the lay audience and people who are actually have busy and complicated lives. 45 pages when we're only proposing to produce a 60-page long-term plan summary. So we're 60 pages for 10 years, 45 pages for this. It's too long. It's too long. It's too wordy. It needs a radical trimming and focus. And although the possibility of achieving some of those things through the informal process suggested by the Mayor certainly exists. I think the consultation will be premature, and I don't think the document will be effective in engaging with the majority of the community. We will get a middle class response from persons who are most particularly engaged with waste minimisation and management, and no one else.
I think it's a bit unfair to be comparing a full document to a summary document. I think if we asked how long the actual LTP is, I think it's a lot more than 60 pages. Are there any other speakers? Councillor Ryan and then Councillor Linwood.
Thank you. I think that we shouldn't have to wait to be forced to do the right thing by the government in this space. We've got a responsibility to our future generations and we need to move quickly. I just dispute Councillor Hopkins' point that the long-term plan is more important than this. Waste minimisation is something that every person in our community has a role in, and we owe it to our future generations to do the right thing. We need to get the feedback from the community and their experience and inputs to see what barriers there are out there, and get that evidence to make decisions going into the future. That's going to be really important, and we should be doing everything that we can to promote waste-free Waitaki. And if the consultation document isn't really going to engage people in the best way, then that's when we need to step up as leaders and be doing our part to get people engaged as well.
Councillor Linwood.
Rebecca summed it up purposely, but I would like to challenge Councillor Hopkins. I actually really enjoyed reading the document. Like, this is our future looking forward. Like, we really do have to look after our environment, and by diverting waste. I know that my age demographic is definitely really interested in waste and what we can do in this space to improve it. So I would like to congratulate Steve and Lucianne on the amazing work that they're doing in trying to educate everyone. And just following on from what Rebecca said, we do need to be leaders and not look at it like it's a negative. It's not, the long-term plan isn't more important at all. So I would just like to dispute that, and thank you.
Okay, Councillor Blackler.
I'll be voting against the motion today, but please don't. I totally endorse Councillor Linwood's and Councillor Ryan's comments around the intent and what we need to achieve. I don't dispute that at all, but I do believe that Councillor Hopkins is correct in around the impact that this could have either way on the engagement with community. And from a personal perspective, I think it should be sitting as part of the LTP.
Thank you. Okay, I am going to put it. Those in favour, please say aye. And against?
No.
I have a show of hands. Those in favour. Those against? Okay. Okay, so it's 5-5 as the vote, so it does go to casting vote. I think this is moving us forward. It's about having a discussion that we have to have, that some of a good part of our community I think wants to have. It's certainly often a criticism that we don't have curbside collections and various things. This is the chance to actually go out again. Personally, I think the system that I use at home works really well, but not everyone uses that same system. It's cost effective and allows good diversion from landfills, but not everyone does that. So anyway, with that, I am casting my vote in favour of the motion, so declare it carried. There will be further engagement on getting the documents fine-tuned a little bit more to the point, and make sure there's more consistency where we think it's needed. So we look forward to doing that. Thank you very much to Lucianne and Steve. Really appreciate the work that you've done on this. And yeah, a few tweaks and it'll be absolutely perfect. Thank you. Okay. Councillors, we're now on to 5.3. So the meeting schedule, we'll get this one done. We'll move into public excluder or adjourn the meeting, and they'll have a brief break before the power meeting can then start. So apologies for the lateness. It's just this has gone a lot longer, obviously, than what we expected, as well as having 20 minutes plus lost at the start through public forum, but that's the way it goes. So item 5.3, Mr. CE, ask if you want to introduce this one.
I'll try and be brief. So the current meeting cycle that we are operating on came out of a governance review by the previous council. It sought to move council from every 6 weeks to more frequent meetings, roughly every 2 weeks, and remove the most of the committees. This has had some positives in terms of being able to be responsive as a council and have shorter, more frequent council meetings, but it also has brought considerable pressure in terms of the cycle of meetings and the capacity to support those meetings. There was a comment made about minutes, the cycle of getting minutes out with more regular meetings, but also the support from the senior team and others in the council to service those meetings has taken up considerable capacity. The revised approach that is being proposed to you today seeks to strike a balance so that we can still be responsive, but have less churn and free up some capacity to focus on other things, in particular transformation. It also seeks to put out agendas sooner. So the aim would be to have agendas out a week in advance of the meeting to give more time for elected members to prepare, but also support openness, so more transparency for those issues that are going to be considered by council to be out there in the community for the community to see a week in advance of the meetings and consider whether they wish to engage with the council on that. Also within here is a proposed definition and some proposed rules around other activities that involve elected members, and this is something we've been looking at in the run-up to and subsequent to the Ombudsman's report. The Ombudsman quite rightly sets out that it's at the discretion of council what it does with non-decision-making activities. Their activities where decisions aren't made are defined in the Act as not being meetings, but they're a necessary part of our business. So there's some proposed rules in there and operating rules in terms of how you deal with those for you to consider. So the recommendation is that you adopt a new meeting cycle for the next year and some rules around how other activities involving elected members operate going forward.
Thank you, Councillor Thompson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm more than comfortable with what's been tabled, and I'm happy to move the recommendation.
Okay, I've got a few minor amendments. So I'll accept your motion and ask for a seconder, Councillor McCone. I just want to run through the suggested changes. Some are very minor, but essentially looking at page 5 of this agenda addendum, number 13, it refers to an elected member and executive leadership team roster. It's a councillor where it's only referring to councillors. I'd rather that reference is made. And just when it comes to
Sorry, Mr. Can you just explain that? I don't quite understand the point you're trying to make.
well, number 13 refers to an elected member roster. It's to go to community boards. It's like, well, the elected members includes the community boards. They are automatically already there, so it's councillors. And obviously, I go to all the ones that I can go to. Just on.
And they are report.
Oh, I wouldn't go that far. Page 8. Briefings D3, it refers to if there's a public interest in not releasing information, that needs to be expanded to public, commercial or privacy interest in not releasing the information. So just tidying that up. When it talks about portfolio discussions, all decision-making rests with council at formal council meetings. My expectation is with the portfolio discussions between portfolio holders and staff that there will also be things discussed which are maybe delegated to the CE and on to staff. So it's not just things that will come to council. A staff member may wish to talk about some other aspects. So I'd like that just to be expanded slightly. When it comes to meetings, all over at the first step, no, the 7th of February. At the moment, we've got, it's the day after Waitaki Day. That's normally set aside for Otago and Southland mayoral forums to meet jointly after the Waitaki Day celebration, wherever it happens. So my suggestion is that we move that to the 8th, which will be the Thursday that week. So just looking, do the councillors have any problem with it not being Wednesday that week? Currently, on the briefings workshops, 7th of February is the first date there, which is Wednesday, the day after Waitaki Day. So the chief executive and I should be at a joint Otago Southland mayoral forum.
You mean we could have fun without you both?
Yes, you could.
We could pass all sorts of.
I think it's a relatively important LTP session where culmination of our Christmas reading pack that we are being given. So I don't want to do all that reading and then not be able to contribute.
Clarity, you couldn't pass any resolutions. It's not a meeting.
The other is just on the list, the 4th Tuesday of the sequence. It's basically Waitaki. No, I forgot the wrong one. Sorry, no, the third one. Focus transformation. That's when we've requested that we have schedule them as governance team only sessions because staff are generally going to be busy with transformation. If they're not needed, then we won't have them, but it provides the strategy days that we find quite useful. And there'll be other bits and pieces that pop up along the way that just allows us some time. So those are some suggestions that I'm making. Happy to have any feedback if anyone has any concerns on any of those. The governance advisor.
Could you, through you, Mr. Chair, could you provide me with a time frame for those governance only strategy sessions? That's why they weren't included. I just don't have the time framework that you required before I can schedule them.
Sure thing. Okay. Any other feedback, Councillor Hopkins and then Councillor Thompson?
Yeah, I'm comfortable with all of this and I'm comfortable with the changes you've proposed, but there are two things that I believe it is essential to change. On page 7 of the addendum, under B, council as employer, there is the operating rules for the Chief Executive Employment Subcommittee. The operating rules say council as employer activities will be closed to the public and any person other than members of the Chief Executive Employment Subcommittee and the Chief Executive unless otherwise agreed. Well, sorry, our standing orders in the Act actually say that councillors can attend all meetings. They can't participate, but they can be there as observers, and that should be stated. Equally, that committee does produce, should be producing, and has in the past produced minutes which go to the council or have previously gone to the council for not for adoption but for information. So I believe that the notion that any person other than the members needs to be amended to allow for what is legislatively provided, and the same in my view should apply with regard to engagement and liaison. That's the engaging with CCOs, where again it says engagement and liaison activities will be closed to the public and any person other than those specifically invited and those members appointed by council. Well, again, I'm sorry, the standing orders are quite clear. We can go along as passive observers. We have that legal right as elected members. And both of those stipulations that all other people other than those, et cetera, should be amended accordingly.
I think you're referring to meetings, but we'll go to Mr. C.
Yeah, I addressed the first one, council and employer. This is not covering the subcommittee. This is covering not meetings. This is things that are not meetings that where, that group of councillors as a that form the subcommittee are meeting with me informally. Might be on a one-to-one, or it might be as a group. Anything formally that is, is the subcommittee would be
in that case,
standing orders.
In that case,
this is about being clear about what happens with those things that are not meetings. Anything that is meetings is covered by standing orders.
We can clarify that.
Yes, that needs to be clarified. In other words, councillors' employer activities other than meetings will be closed. And the same would apply to the engagement of liaison.
Yeah, and that's covering not meetings, things that are not council.
So no, we'll get those amendments made. Councillor Ryan, thank you.
Thank you. Just a question around the operating rules for workshops and really the reasoning around a summary record being kept of the feedback provided and the outcome of the workshops rather than live streamings or recordings and how people would access that information.
So the main reason for that was around administrative burden. If you start wanting to live stream and minutes or workshops, then I'll be coming to you saying, what the cost of that will be in terms of additional staff and capacity. So, if that's what you want, I'd need to come back with you as to what the cost of that is going to be, because we're not resourced to do that at this stage.
I think if there's any debate about that, we're already complaining about not getting minutes through because workload issues. So there is no doubt it will require a greater resourcing than what we've currently got. It's not being used as an excuse, it's a reality. Anyone else? Okay, I've got this moved and seconded. I shall put it with those amendments. Those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
And against? That's carried. Can we now move into public excluded? Someone like to move that? Councillor Linwood, Councillor Blackler. Those in favour, please say aye. And against? I think that's a split vote. I'll use my casting. No, that was carried. Thank you very much. So we're going to pause this meeting, go on to the PAR meeting. Apologies to everyone that this has run so late, but it was discussion that needed to have, we needed to have. So thank you very much for your contributions. Thank you very much to members of the public, both present and on the live stream. And yeah, we'll basically see you again.